Well, today you have Renee Gogler and Courtney King, and we are a mortgage lender and a realtor. We're going to talk to you about the housing crisis. So, in our last episode, we talked a little bit about buy versus rent, the pros and the cons. And so that kind of led us into talking about what is going on with the housing crisis right now. So, welcome to Prosperity Playbook. We are a group of friends who have some knowledge in our world that we'd like to share that we didn't learn in school. And so, we'd like to pass that along to everybody else.
It's about June 2025 right now, just for longevity and what date we're dealing with. I remember in a past podcast or when we recorded this originally and we had technical difficulties, we were talking about Trump isn't going to save you. He had talked about asking the feds to lower the interest rate, which is not even the one that affects mortgage rates and all these things to facilitate first-time homebuyers or people getting into the real estate market.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing when we talk about the housing crisis right now, I think people are thinking it's just unaffordable. And there's an entire generation of people that have kind of given up on the fact that they think that they can buy. And obviously, we don't like that. I believe real estate is a wealth builder for most people. And so we want to give people some hope, but I want to talk about this housing crisis to start with. So, yes, things are expensive. They feel expensive. Interest rates feel super high. So, I want to break that down into what is real right now. First of all, let's start with interest rates. So, are in the low sevens, high sixes as of recording this on your NPR.
Depends on your credit score, 100% down, what type of loan you're doing.
Yeah, there's a million different things that go into your particular interest rate. But I think because we had twos and threes a couple of years ago, people feel that the sixes and sevens is really high. And the real truth is sixes and sevens is normal. And I know nobody really wants to hear that, but twos and threes were fake interest rate. Those were something that was artificially bought down by the government buying mortgage backed securities. So, on that note, we don't want to really hope for 2 and 3% interest rates. That means the wheels have fallen off if we see that again. So, is it possible we could get into the fives? Yes. Maybe next year, maybe even the end of this year. It will depend on what happens with the economy. Basically, how it works is the worse that the economy gets, the better mortgage rates will typically get. And the reason for that is stocks and bonds compete for the same investment dollar. If stocks aren't doing well because people are nervous about the economy, then money tends to flow into bonds when mortgage-backed securities are bonds. And so that is what brings mortgage rates down. It's not the Fed dropping rates. So when the Fed says they're dropping rates, that is basically short-term money that banks use to borrow money from each other overnight. So that might affect your car loan, maybe your credit card, maybe a home equity line of credit.
Your
But it's
savings account.
yeah, absolutely. What you get paid on your savings account, all of those kinds of things, but it is not long-term mortgage rates. So the Fed actually cannot control mortgage rates directly other than by them going in and buying treasuries or mortgage-backed securities. And that is one of the things that they did during COVID. They bought trillions of dollars of those with a T. And that's a big deal. That's not just a simple decision that they make. And they felt like they had to do that based on, the crisis that was going on with COVID and everything at the time. So would not expect to see that happening anytime soon.
And what drove the prices of real estate up goes back to supply and demand. And during the pandemic, the supply was lower, the demand was much higher. So our prices here were going up 30% plus. I've seen up to 60% or even more. And now things are cooling off because of the perception of the interest rates being higher. The actual cost of the property is higher than what we wanted to see. We like the slow, steady growth over time. Um, so we are trying to come up with different ideas to help with getting into the real estate market. So it's important to get in somewhere. We were talking about that in another episode. Um, if you're renting versus owning real estate, how much wealth is built for each one? Do you remember what that stat was?
Yeah, so renters are their net worth is 40 times less than what a homeowner is. So that's certainly is a big number. But let's talk about the supply and demand thing that you talked about before. So one of the things people, especially in Bozeman, Montana, and some of these areas that were like typically an ag town, people get pretty fired up about the fact that they think there's going to be more development and more houses being created. People don't like that, but they also don't like home prices to go up. And it's simply supply and demand. So if you want home prices to go down, there has to be development. There has to be more homes that come into the market. And I was interviewed on the news last year. One of our one of our government officials was looking at putting in a first time home buyer incentive, like a $20,000 down payment assistance. And they asked me if I thought that that would help the the housing crisis. And I said it's going to do the opposite of that, because what happens is you're putting more demand for buyers into a market where there already is more demand than what there were sellers back then. And so the more people you bring into the market, the more prices have to go up. So now if everybody has a pre $20,000, basically what happens is that increases the prices by $20,000, and it doesn't usually end up actually helping anybody. And down payment isn't the biggest reason that I see most people not qualifying. The biggest reason that I see people not qualifying in this market is because they have too big of a car loan or too many other debts. So that $1,000 truck payment that some of these kids get right after out of college, and not even just kids, like that, we live in an area where a lot of people drive a big truck, and that's just, and so do I, but mine's paid for. But if you have a $700 payment on your vehicle, that reduces the price of what you can qualify for a house by $100,000. That's a really, really big number. And sometimes when you get into these high car payments and you're upside down on them, there's not an easy way to get out of it, because you can't just sell the car and make it go away. So that's one of the things that's the most common. Sometimes it's down payment, but for the most part, it's really just people needing to prioritize their financing. So as rates do drop, though, I think that that's going to further increase the demand, because what you've got is for every 1% that rates drop, statistically that brings 5 million more buyers into where they qualify for a home. And that's a lot of people. So right now, as she said, June 2025, we've got a really unique opportunity right now. We've got some decent inventory in the market. We don't see that very often. And I think this is pretty similar across the United States right now. I think we've got about a 5 month supply, which means if no more inventory came on the market based on the current pool of buyers, how many months would it take for that to get eaten up? And right now, about 5 months, that's a super healthy market. That's exactly where we want to be.
Balanced.
Balanced, exactly. And we don't see that a lot. In the past couple years, it's been just craziness and everybody competing against 27 other offers, and buyers have no negotiating power. And we're just not in that market anymore, which is actually a really good thing. So if you're a buyer, you probably have a lot more negotiation power than you've ever had in the last, well, in my career, other than maybe 2008. So most of the buyers I have right now are either seeing price reductions, sellers paying closing costs, seller buying down your interest rate, fixing inspection items.
Hmm.
But that doesn't mean that you can just go and offer, a 25% discount on every house, right? And get that offer accepted.
You can try, but that, you want to be really careful with that, so that you don't offend the seller. And the sellers are having a hard time with this as well right now. They're not wanting to come into the market at a lower price. But what I'm seeing is they're having to catch up to where the market is. And so you see price reduction, price reduction, price reduction. And then the negative side of that is your home gets the stigmatism of being something wrong with it. When
Maybe
it's
not a stigmatism, but the stigma.
yes, stigmatism, that's your eyes. We get nervous.
I was like, that doesn't sound right. Okay, so say that again.
Stigma of the house being on the market too long if you're trying to catch up to the market price.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, exactly what you said, that sellers haven't really, they're so used to that like hot market where they get all these offers and it sells in 2 days. And we just really don't live in that market right now. Although I'm still seeing multiple offers on things. I'm still seeing houses that are priced correctly, that are kind of in a hot market. They're priced, or they're selling within a week or so. So
Yeah, if it's priced well, you might get multiple offers and then you will drive the price up just by the buyers being excited about your property and wanting to make sure that they get the best offer into you.
yeah, absolutely. And I do think if you haven't looked at in a while, like say you were thinking about buying in 2020 and 21 and you were like, I just got priced out of the market, things were crazy, I don't want anything to do with it. This might be a really good time to dip your toe back in, just see what else is out there, because the the realtors and everybody like to post all the fancy big numbers like our median price is 700,000 or a million or whatever it is, but they don't nobody really focuses on that entry market. Like what can you start with? And I think you can get a single family home that starts with 4 right now, get a condo that starts with a 3. If you want to go Livingston, you can get one that starts with a 2. So if you haven't looked in a while, this is a really good time to take a look again. In fact, something that happens to me almost every single week is that I have a client that calls me that's already under contract on her property and they need to rush pre-approval. And the answer that they tell me every time as to why they did it in the backwards order is because they didn't really think they were looking. They didn't expect to find something that they wanted. They were just kind of casually looking, and then all of a sudden, the perfect property was there. I mean, this happens to me easily 3 times a week. I had 3 last week that bought over $1 million properties, and they weren't even looking.
So it's good to get into your lender. Renee's been in lending for how many years?
21.
And I've been in real estate for 30. And we really like for you to get in and get all the documentation taken care of right away. And all you have to do to update it when they find the right property is
Yeah,
way less time.
exactly. I think it's a super important thing to start there. The other reason, and we've talked about this before, but if you start, say you think your price range is 700,000 and you start looking at houses there, but then you go get pre-approved and you find out you actually only like the payment for 600,000, everything at 600,000 looks like crap because you've already looked at the 700,000 one. So I've seen more buyers break their own hearts by doing that. And it truly makes me sad when I do see that. So it's a great time to come back in, look at the market if you haven't seen it in a while, and just kind of see what's out there. Dip your toe in, like we said.
Yeah, after being in real estate for 30 years, this is the first time that I've seen this much negotiation power here for buyers.
Yeah, I agree. With the exception of maybe 2008 when everything was kind of stagnant. But I think who you work with matters more than ever right now. Whether you're listing your home to sell or whether you're a buyer, because I've seen a lot of agents price things incorrectly. They'll like put out the highest price in there so that they can win the listing. And then, like she said, your home gets a stigma associated with it when you have it sitting there stale on the market for a couple of weeks. Then all of a sudden people just wonder what's wrong with it. They just assume something's wrong with it. So then they don't even go look at it. So it's really, really important to have somebody that understands this market, knows how to creatively market your property, get it in front of the buyers. And then on the flip side of that, as a buyer, you need to have a good agent that can show you how to negotiate on a property. In fact, I had one this weekend that came in, it was multiple offers. And I know the only reason my buyers got theirs accepted was because they had a really good agent who knew how to negotiate that. He knew what to put in the contract. And, he's honestly well known and well liked in this town. And that matters. It really does because the listing agent wants to work with somebody that they trust to get the deal done.
I love working with agents that I know that they're on top of it and they communicate even when things are going awry. Um,
So, okay. So let's say you've looked back at the market and you've talked to a lender and you still realize, okay, I'm in a spot where I can't buy. Let's talk about house hacking. What are some ways that we can get into this market? So, first of all, one of the things I'm seeing a lot of right now is that boomer generation has quite a bit of wealth and they don't know how to transfer it from one generation into the next. So, one of the things that we see a lot is when maybe a parent can either gift some money for a down payment or a grandparent. And if they don't have a big chunk of money to gift to help with that down payment, potentially co-signing on a loan for them to help them qualify for a higher price range might be the right answer. And then maybe either the parents are going to help with payments a little bit or the buyer's going to get a roommate or two to live with them, something like that. There's a couple of different options.
is there a limit on the gift?
There is a limit on the gift, only on paper. So people always assume that they can't gift more than a certain amount, but it's actually not true. If you gift over what the annual limit is, and that changes every year, all you have to do is file a gift tax form. And what that does is it tracks the amount over that limit that it is. So it comes off of your lifetime exemption. Your lifetime exemption that also changes every single year, but it's like $20 million. So if you end up getting gifted over that, you'll probably be okay with paying a little bit of taxes at that point. So if it's going to be something that's over than the annual limit right now, that's okay. Just know that there's some paperwork associated with it, but nobody actually has to file a gift tax form. So if you are somebody that has tried all of these things and you still can't get into the market, it's still too expensive for you, then it's time to start looking at some other options. One of the options might be asking a parent or grandparent for help. So there's an entire generation of baby boomers that has a quite a bit of wealth that they're not really sure how to transfer down to the younger generations. One of the ways that we see that happen is by them helping you to buy your first home. So they can gift money to do that. There is a limit, an annual limit. In 2025, it's $19,000. However, if you go over that limit, all that has to happen is a gift tax form is filed. And that tracks the amount over that annual limit you are, and it comes off of the lifetime amount that you can be gifted by that person. Again, that number changes every year as well, but right now it's 13.99 million. So it's a huge number. If somebody gifts you $100,000, there's no gift tax actually do. You just have to file that form so that that can be tracked. So that is a huge misconception. I get this question all the time. It's one of the most common things that deters somebody from wanting to do a gift, but there's no reason for that to stop you.
Yep, that's something along the lines of the house hacks that we're talking about, and some other ideas that you can do to make things a little bit more affordable in your monthly mortgage payment. I've done them myself in the past. You can find some property that produces rental income, like a basement apartment, an ADU, which is an accessory dwelling unit. You can use the space over garage, or some people, if you're comfortable with it, rent out their bedrooms. There are certain ways that it needs to be set up for qualifying for mortgages to be able to use that income. Renee,
Yeah, definitely. So if you're just getting a roommate that is somebody brand new to you, you can't use that to qualify. However, you could potentially have a parent co-sign for you. So say your parents don't have a big chunk of money that they want to get, but they want to help somehow. So they could potentially co-sign on the loan, which would mean we take into account everybody's income, assets, credit, liabilities, and we put it all together in one debt to income ratio. So they can help you qualify for that higher payment, and then you could potentially have a roommate to help offset that and make that more comfortable for you. But there are ways you can use it to qualify as well. If you've had the same person living with you for a year and paying rent to you, there are programs that allow us to use that rent moving forward. Or if you buy, and like she said, an ADU, which basically means it's a little separate access to that property. You can use projected rental income to qualify with that, usually 75% of that. Or if you buy a duplex, triplex, or fourplex, same thing. You can use 75% of the projected rent from the other units to help you qualify. And this is actually kind of a cool hack that we've used with some of my clients. It will increase your price range by about $200,000 if you are going to a duplex instead. And that's just a rough math based on projected numbers, but that's definitely something to consider.
another one is multi-generational housing.
Yeah.
We did a transaction together, and the buyers were younger, starting out with kids. The parents had plenty of money and were told constantly, you need to invest this money. So they decided to invest at real estate with the kids. The kids live on one side, and then there's a smaller unit on the other side that they're able to come stay in when they want to visit the grandchildren they now have, or they rent it out short term on the times during the times that they're not here.
Yeah, I'm seeing more and more of that, especially kind of my sandwich generation where we still kind of got kids at home, but we also got our parents that are starting to be aging and not maybe ready for long-term care, but need to be a little bit closer to somebody that can take care of them. So we are starting to see that where maybe even the parents are downsizing and they're buying a duplex together. I just did one of these the other day, and that's exactly what they were doing. Like you said, there was another one that had grandkids and mom and dad were going to live here and grandma and grandpa were going to live here and they were all going to help each other out. And mom and dad were downsizing their house to do that. So they were able to contribute down payment to make that payment affordable for everybody. So there's lots of different ways to tackle that. And it doesn't have to be your parents that you're buying a home with. So you can actually buy a home with anybody. It doesn't you don't have to be married. You don't have to be related. The only exception to this is a VA loan. If you're getting a veterans loan, you have to buy that property with another either your spouse or another veteran in order to get 100% financing on it. You can still do it without, but you do have to have a down payment on that. Otherwise, any conventional loan, FHA loan, even rural development, as long as they're going to occupy the property, it can be a friend, it can be a boyfriend, a girlfriend. It doesn't really matter that whether or not you're married in all of those other cases. So,
Are
yeah,
you seeing investors do any kind of house hacking? Or investor pools? I was asked this last week.
as far as investor pools, that's probably not, they're probably not getting a loan if they're doing an investor pool of some kind. So I'm not personally seeing it. But I definitely am seeing a lot. Probably the most common investment one that I see is parents whose kids are going to school at Montana State and they realize what rent's going to be here. And so they want to buy a property to put their kids in while they're living there and then collect rent from the friends. And then they can kind of control the fact that they know their kid always has a place to live. And they're doing that as a rental property. And it might not cash flow crazy for them. But by the time, that kid's done with 4 years of school, they haven't dumped everything away in rent, and chances are that property will have appreciated in the meantime. So that's the number one thing that I
Is there
personally see.
tax incentive for that too?
It depends on how we structure it. So if you're doing it as an investment property, there's lots of tax advantages. So you can claim depreciation against the property. Like we're basically just setting it up as an investment property. So you can take all the tax advantages of that. Another way that we do it sometimes, though, is we'll actually add that college student as long as they have a credit score. We'll put them as the primary borrower. They're the one that's going to occupy the property, and then the parents are just non-occupying co-borrowers. And so the best or why that works so well is because now you get primary residence interest rates and you don't have to put as much down as you would on an investment property. So yes, that's going to change the tax, what you can report on taxes a little bit differently. So each individual situation, you'd figure out what's best for you. But it's a great way for your kid to learn the loan process early, help them build additional credit, and then, build something that's in their name potentially as well, and get a little bit lower payment or lower down payment than you would if it was just a straight rental.
I guess with the investor pool, what I was thinking of is if you had a group of friends that you wanted to buy property with, whether you are going in and living together on it, or would you be flipping the property?
So I have seen that a few times where it's usually like two couples that will go and buy maybe a vacation house that they're going to rent together. I'll be honest, I'm not a huge fan of that particular situation. I don't see a lot of business ventures that work out well with people, whether it's a regular business or a real estate investment. I think if you're going to do that, you just really want to make sure that you are putting all of your details in writing up front as far as, hey, what happens when one of us wants to sell? What are our intentions for this? How much personal use are we actually going to have of this property? Make sure that that's outlined so that it's not everybody fighting over 4th of July weekend at the lake house or whatever it is, because I have absolutely seen that happen. So you just want to make sure that you really know who you're getting into business with if you are going to do that, and then have an exit strategy planned, which we kind of talked about that one of our earlier episodes. So maybe go back and look at that one.
Yep, and there's definitely different ways that you want to structure it and think about your exit strategy. So if you're buying with even a sibling and you get in a fight, how are you going to get out of that? Or if you're buying it when you're dating somebody, um, you'll want to make sure that you would be able to qualify to buy them out, or you have to sell the property or keep owning it. We've both had situations where couples didn't work out and one person ends up with the property, and I get called all the time too to do a market analysis because the couple is dissolving.
Right. Yep, it's definitely a thing. And just because you're married, that doesn't mean you're immune from that either, just like you said. So I think it's just always kind of important thing to keep in mind. But most real estate, as long as you're planning to hold it long term, then you're going to come out okay on it. So I think the biggest, most important thing for people to understand about getting into the market is it is about timing the market, but not in the way that most people think. It's about getting in as soon as you can and then writing that market up. So you may not be able to get the most amazing first house. It might not be that perfect Instagram ready house, but find the most affordable thing that you can find in your market. And that is what your first house should be. If you can't find the perfect thing, that's okay. Go find something that will fit your family's needs. Now, it might be a fixer upper, but if you're not a person that can take on a fixer upper, don't do that. You're just putting yourself in for a lot of work that you don't know. If you're handy, great. Otherwise, go find something small, something cheaper, and just get started somewhere. It won't be your dream house. That's okay. Plan to stay there for 2 years. You should always know that you could stay there at least 5 years or so if you had to, just because markets do fluctuate and things happen. So I would always plan to be there 5 or 10 years, even if your real goal is only 2 years. But after 2 years, you can typically take that appreciation after you've lived in it as your primary residence. You can take up to $250,000 per person tax free. And that is how you get into the market because now, whatever the house has gone up, you have that appreciation money to go put as your down payment on the next one.
Or is that appreciation only if or that equity only if you're married, or how would that work if you're not married?
So it's up to 500,000 per couple. So I think it's 250 per person on that if you're doing it. So there is a individual versus a couple situation. So the in 2 years, usually you're not above those limits regardless, but you can take that money and then go do what you want with it. So it really is the best way to build wealth, in my opinion. If you think about making money in the stock market, you have to have all of your money invested. So if I want to invest $100,000 in the stock market, I have to invest $100,000. But if I want to have $100,000 in real estate, like if I have $100,000 in cash, that gets me a much bigger property. That's not just $100,000 in real estate. That is my down payment on probably a $700,000 or an $800,000 property. So
If you get to
leverage.
live in it and can't
Right.
get in your stocks.
Right, exactly. And you don't have to pay rent in the meantime, and that property is likely going to appreciate. I think that's people get really wrapped up in cash flow and they forget about how important it is that real estate tends to really go up in value over time. Even in these slow markets the last couple of years, the national average is 4% increase. And a 4% increase year over year is not a terrible thing at all. You're still building equity by paying down your principal. Again, you're not paying rent. You've been able to not have to worry about if you're getting kicked out of your rental. There's so many real reasons for it. So just out about getting into the market as soon as you can, even if that's not that perfect house. All of the stars are kind of aligning for a lot of buyers to come back in the market. People are waiting on rates, they're waiting to see what's going to happen with tariffs or this war or whatever else that happens. And so if everybody else is waiting and you're the buyer that sees the opportunity in the market and can come in and negotiate with these sellers and get a lower price, get them to buy down your interest rate, pay your closing costs, it means you have to come up with less money, you get a lower payment, and you get a potentially good deal on a piece of real estate. And then as everybody else floods back in the market and those values rise, you get to take advantage of that. And what I can tell you is right now I'm seeing a lot of high-end buyers buying. And what that tells me is, I mean, the rich get richer for a reason, right? They know what's the secrets are. They know how to spot the opportunities. And so what I'm really passionate about is helping everyday people see the same opportunities that these other people are. So if I had clients put three $1 to $2 million homes under contract yesterday alone, that tells me that the people that are affluent that know what's coming in real estate are buying now. And so when you see a lot of people being scared, you look to what the people that have already made it are doing and they're buying right now. And I really think that that is a huge golden opportunity. I think that this will be one of those markets that people look back on and say, I wish I had bought in 2005. I just bought another house myself in Arizona because I really very strongly believe in this market.
I've been looking too, and I saw one that I've kept an eye on drop significantly in price today. So I'm gonna ask you about that, Jazz.
Fair enough. We'll get your pre-approval.
I have some ideas. But anyway, the point is to get in somewhere and just get started. And if you are interested in learning more, call either of us, Renee or Courtney, or your local lender and find out what you need to do to get started.
Yeah, and if you're not there right now, it's never just a no. It's a, hey, here's your roadmap. Here's how we get you there. And actually starting the process before you're really ready to go can be a really good idea because if we need to make little tweaks on credit or paying off debt or saving money or whatever that is, we can tell you that. I can help you build that roadmap so that you know how to get to where you'll be prepared and ready to go when it actually is the right time for you to buy. So don't give up. That's my biggest message is keep hope. And if you're someone that's wanting to buy your first home, ask some questions, talk to your family. And if you are somebody that has some generational wealth that you are thinking you would like to transfer to somebody younger in your family, don't be afraid to do that. There's no shame in asking for a little bit of help, especially with where things are right now. So keep the hope alive, ask the questions, find out where you're at. And thank you so much for listening to Prosperity Playbook. Again, this is Renee and Courtney. Here's to empowering each other.
One story at a time.